Welcome to another show of The Impact. I'm your host, Samantha. Really excited to bring you behind the scenes with my guests, telling you their stories going from tragedy to triumph to help you in your business career and life. Today, our show is so special to me. It's near and dear to my heart. My guest is someone that some of you may know and some of you don't know, but if you know me, then you know her because she is my mother. Today's show is titled Abducted, Abused, and Abandoned: How I Got Over. We're going really deep behind the scenes into the story of Wyleaner, the Las Vegas Queen of Gospel, who shares how she was abducted, abused, and abandoned, and how she actually overcame all of that. But make sure you stay tuned because there are some bizarre twists to this story that you don't want to miss. And when we come back, you'll be meeting Wyleaner, the Las Vegas Queen of Gospel.
It's your time to choose yourself. It's your time to heal. Transform your relationships, manage your trauma, tackle challenges with boldness and grace. Break the stigma of mental health. Inner healing is yours through the 21 Days of Healing Journal, created by women and girls sharing their healing journeys with quotes to inspire you for each day. Order yours today to get your healing.
Welcome back to the show. We are here in Las Vegas, my home, and this is the most special show I've ever recorded. Those of you who tune in every month, every other week, you know that I enjoy doing the show, but this show touches my heart because I get to interview my mother today in my hometown. So again, Wyleaner, the Las Vegas Queen of Gospel, I welcome you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Samantha. Ooh.
This is the first time and only time I get to call you by first name and not get slapped.
Yeah. And you don't make it no habit, okay? I'll let you get away with it today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Samantha.
We are in Las Vegas, in my hometown, your hometown. You're the Las Vegas Queen of Gospel. How are you feeling today?
Ooh, I have to exhale. Because I'm actually a little overwhelmed right now because I'm on my daughter's show for one, and I don't know, I'm really at a loss for words. I really am, but I'm just excited to be here. Wow, I almost don't know what to say because I would never have thought that I would be sitting on my daughter's show being interviewed about me. So I'm really speechless. And most people that know me know it's hard for me to become speechless.
Right. And this is special for you too. Not only are we in beautiful Las Vegas, but you have not done a show publicly interviewing, being interviewed, talking about your story. And you really have a bizarre, wild, very interesting story, to say the very least. So now, you know, you've been interviewing people on a show that you've had, and now you're in the hot seat. How do you feel about that?
I don't know how to feel being in the hot seat because I'm never in the hot seat. I usually refuse to be in this position. I like being on the opposite side where you are asking all the questions, and there's many people that have actually wanted to put me in this position, but I have declined more than one interview. But because you're my daughter and I trust you and I love you, I'm still a little antsy about it, you know, but for the most part, I'm prepared to walk this walk with you.
Well, you know, you'll be sharing a lot of intimate things today, and stuff that you've only shared with my brothers and I, and some other close family and friends over the years. So I can understand this being unnerving for you.
Yes.
So when you, we got a lot to cover today. And when you think about those things, just know that I am honored to hear your story, even though I've heard it a million times, but I'm honored to hear it in this setting today, and that you would trust me to share it with the world. Today we're going to dive into a lot of your life, your personal traumas, and some real raw behind the scenes kind of things. And I know the purpose is a greater purpose than just sharing who you are and what you've gone through. And we'll get to that, the abducted part, right? Trying to find some of you're trying to complete your family tree and find some of your relatives. But I see you getting teary-eyed already.
Yeah, already. Yeah.
So you have a lot of accomplishments that you had in your life, and I want to talk about some of those before we get into all of the deep things that you're so willing to share today. Tell me about your talk show. You had a show called The Wyleaner Show, where the rubber meets the road.
Yes. Yes, definitely. It was a religion talk show. Not religious, but a religion talk show, where I started it in 2001, and I ran it all the way up until 2018, I believe. And I interviewed various religious leaders. I would have 2 different denominations on at the same time and ask them the same questions about what they believe to be the quote unquote truth. Because basically everyone says that they have the truth. So I would interview a Mormon and a Muslim on the same show, or a Pentecostal and a Baptist on the same show, Rastafarian, Judeo-Christian,
atheist,
agnostic. Yes, and I would ask each one of them the same question. I had live callers calling in. Actually, when I first started the show, I started it on television locally here in Las Vegas, and it was ran in front of a live audience in a restaurant called H&H Barbecue. They're gone now, but it was a dinner show. So they would come in and they would eat their dinner, and then the show would begin. So the audience was already there and prepared to watch whoever I was interviewing. And I was really a live wire. I smile a lot and jump up and down. And I always did that because I wanted to bring excitement and cheer to the guests and the audience at the same time, because religion and politics, those 2 things can cause people to get very angry, and combative and that type of thing. So in order to keep the peace, I was always the cheerful, upbeat one. But I asked serious questions, about their teachings and their beliefs. I did a lot of research on this denomination and on this denomination.
Yeah. And I loved your show. It was really great to see the 2 different perspectives.
Yes.
Because you learn a lot. Sometimes we say it's just the one way, but when you hear all these different ways, then you think, oh wow, there are so many other ways that I didn't know about. So you learn quite a bit there.
And as far as it's kept, you were a guest on my show as well. And I don't remember who I had on with us at that particular time. But my show started on television here in Las Vegas. And then it went from television, because the station went down. The channel that I was on, it went down. So then defunct, I think that's what they call it. But I went from there to radio. And actually the radio station was recording visually. So my show has always been a visual show, which was really interesting. When I got to the radio station, they were recording, and I'm like, oh wow, this is great. So we put it on the internet, and then it went from radio and internet to just internet. And then someone in Pakistan saw my show. So they wanted my show to run on Bright Star Christian television in Pakistan.
Okay.
So it ran on television in Pakistan for 2 years. And then it just went straight back to the internet. I really enjoyed doing the internet because it allowed me to be able to interview people all over, not just locally in Las Vegas, because initially I was only able to interview people in Las Vegas.
Right. So a show that was focused on religion, covering these topics, and not only were you online, but you went to TV, and then Pakistan, you were there, and
Yes.
and it became a really big thing for you. So congratulations on that. You did a great job. I know, with the show, you also at the same time you were a gospel singer, and you're retired from the school district, and worked with young people, and now you're doing work in the community and so many other things. So you're doing community work to help feed people, which is honorable. Tell me about one of the struggles that you had growing up that you believe got you to get involved with helping people in the community.
Well, I've had a lot of struggles growing up. But the one, in answer to your question, the one particular struggle that placed my mind in the category of helping others was when I was homeless. Because I was literally homeless on the street as a teenager. I actually had to sleep on the ground. And I tried to find people to help me, and nobody would. So with that being said, I ended up outdoors, and I had to steal food to eat. I would have to go into a store and just find something and hide it and leave and go eat it. There was no programs like, for instance, your program that you have, L3. There was no programs out there to help a teenage girl like myself that was homeless.
Yeah, you didn't know about any of the programs if they were out there.
If they were out there, I knew nothing about them. And it's one thing I learned from that too, is that when you are down, you find out who your friends truly are. Because I thought I had friends back then, and they were not my friends, because when I needed a place to live and when I needed food to eat, they didn't come through for me. And there was people that I found, people that may let me spend a night. I'm sorry, I have to use my tissue here, because when I think about all that I've been through and where I'm sitting right now, it just kind of, it brings me to tears. But, back then, I thought I had friends, and there was people that might let me spend a night. They call it couch surfing nowadays. They might let me spend a night, and then I had to go the next day. And so I had to find another spot, and another spot, and another spot. And as far as food was concerned, some people would give me something to eat and others wouldn't, so I had to do what I had to do in order to survive
just
on
to
the
get
streets.
food.
Yes.
Just to get a meal.
And so now when I feed people, I think about where I came from and what I went through. And when I see people here in Las Vegas sleeping on the streets, I think about where I came from. And I know what they're going through. Because I laid on the ground in the dirt. And when I see those people laying on the ground in the dirt with nobody, that it seems that nobody cares, I want to feed them all. I want to pick them all up off the ground and give them a place to live. I want to do what I can to help them, but of course I can't, so, but whatever I can do, I try.
And you do that with your food program now.
Yes.
And I have often told this story to friends and some colleagues. I work with an organization in Tallahassee, CESC, the Kearney Center, and they help to feed and house people. And the reason my heart is so big for that work is because of you. Because from, I don't know, whatever age I can remember back to, you had us in the homeless shelters every week. Every week. And as a kid, it was like every week. And so every week, you know, we're there feeding people. But then also, I remember the church was doing, you were working with the church doing food baskets. So we would have to take food baskets to families in need, you know, some low to moderate income families who needed food. And a lot of times we miss that. We don't realize that moderate income families are short on food too.
Exactly.
So your heart is so big in that area, and I felt that, which created a big heart for me to have for those people who need food. So thank you.
Thank you. It
goes to show you that there are things we endure for a greater reason and purpose than ourselves.
Yes.
So I appreciate what you're doing now for those in the community. You're helping feed them on Saturdays and Wednesdays.
Yes.
And this is free food from the stores and everywhere, right?
Yes.
And community gives you food and you give it back.
Yes, without doubt. I have a program that I do at my house, in my driveway. I get food donated from one of the local grocery stores here at Sprouts, and I distribute that food to anyone that needs it.
Yeah.
I pick it up in my pickup truck. I drive a pickup truck. And I go and I pick it up, I load up all those boxes, and then I take them back to my house and unload them. Sometimes I have volunteers to help me, and sometimes I don't.
Yeah.
You know, I have friends that come and, you know, help me load up my truck and help me unload. And then when we get the food, we sort it all out and make it organized and make it look good for people to come and get it, you know.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate the people that do help me when they can. And when they can't, I still go alone.
That's a blessing.
Yeah.
And you're being a blessing to so many. So when you talked about being homeless on the street as a teenager,
Yes.
I want to know where your parents were. And so while you think about that, let's take a commercial break and we'll come back and hear, where were your parents during all of this? We'll be right back with Wyleaner, the Las Vegas Queen of Gospel. We're back with Wyleaner, my mother, sharing her story of how she was abducted, abandoned, and abused. Ma, like I like to call you.
Okay, I like that too.
So before commercial break, you were telling us about how you were homeless as a teenager. And when I first hear that, as I work with young people, I often wonder, where were their parents? And so the same thing came to mind for you. Where were your parents?
Well, Samantha, that's a deep question. And the reason why I say it's a deep question is because there were some people that were supposed to be my parents, but they turned out to not be my parents. So when you ask me where my parents, I have to say I don't know where my parents are or where my parents were ever, because I've never actually met my biological parents, mother or father. Now the people that had me at that particular time, they left me. And
Tell us where you were. Where
I was in Madisonville, Kentucky.
Where did it all begin?
Well,
To your knowledge.
Where did it all begin? You mean from growing up, from a child coming up?
From inception,
Okay.
Where were you born?
Well, I don't have a birth certificate. I've never had a birth certificate. So I was told by the people that raised me that I was born in Washington, D.C. I did go to Washington, D.C. to try to find my birth records, and they said there was no record. They couldn't find any record. But there's just been so many unanswered questions over the years, I really don't know where I was born. I just used what they told me. I've never seen a birth certificate with my name on it in my entire life. So I don't know if even the date is correct. But of course they gave me a date, so that's the date I've always used, December 28th.
Did you ever ask for your birth certificate?
I didn't ask them, no, because it was never, I didn't find out that they weren't my parents anyway until another tragedy happened. And I'm assuming that you're going to get into that with me at some point in this conversation, but for the most part, where they're concerned, they never offered a birth certificate to me. I never saw one. When I was a kid, I remember the lady taking me to get a Social Security card, and I believe that was in the Carolinas somewhere when she did that. But all I know is they told me I was born in Washington, D.C. They told me I was born at George Washington Hospital. They told me I was born December 28, 1956. I don't have any proof of any of that. So I have an ID, but in order for me to get my driver's license, I used my school record in high school, and I took my school record to the Department of Motor Vehicle or whatever it was called then, and that's how I got my first driver's license. So I never let my driver's license expire, because I know if it does, then I have to produce a birth certificate, which is something that I don't have. And I don't even know how to go about getting one, seeing as how I went to the location. I went to the Department of Vital Statistics in Washington, D.C. in 2011. Looking for that information, because I was actually on tour with my music at that particular time, so I decided to stop in Washington, D.C. and do a little research and see if I could get my records and stuff while I was out there. But of course, I turned up nothing.
So you don't have a birth certificate?
No.
You don't know where you were born?
No.
You were given a date?
Yes.
This is your date of birth?
Yes.
How'd you get your name?
I have no clue. They told me stories when I was a kid growing up. The woman told me that I she told me that I was her child, and that I was 6 months premature, and she said that she had a doctor, and while she was pregnant, this is the story that she told, and she said the doctor wife was pregnant, and they thought they were going to have a girl and they had a boy. So they were going to name their child Wyleaner. And since they didn't, and he was her doctor, she said she chose to name me that name because that was her doctor, was a good doctor, whatever the case may be. But
and you later found out that none of that was true.
All of that turned out to just be hogwash. For the simple reason, when I came to Las Vegas, that's when I found, and I think I must have been about, I would say 25 years old.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up all over. All over the east side of the United States. They traveled a lot. So they raised me on the road, constantly going from city to city and state to state. And the thing of it is, they were supposedly, quote unquote, evangelists. He was supposed to be a preacher and she was supposed to be an evangelist. And so they traveled all over from city to city and state to state, running revivals at different people's churches. So I was literally raised in church, and almost in church, because they kept me in church 7 days a week, because they were running revivals all the time. And so every day we was in church, every night we was in church, you know. And but they would leave one city and go to another city, leave one city and go to another city. We traveled on the road a lot. We was always in a car going from another place to another place. And that's how they raised me. They would leave houses full of furniture, and they would wake me up in the middle of the night and say, Wyleaner, it's time for us to go. And I'll be like, where we going, Mama? Where we going, Daddy? Don't worry about it. Just get in the car. And they would pack up our clothes. And we would walk away, and we would leave a house full of furniture where you could just come in and just start living. They would just take our clothes, and we would get in the car and drive away and never go back. I'll never forget a house that we lived in Champaign, Illinois. And Champaign, Illinois is across the street from Urbana, Illinois. And Champaign, we had a nice house. And I just loved that house. And I'll never forget, one night they just woke me up in the middle of the night and they said, Wyleaner, we got to go. And I was like, what? You know, why? Don't worry about it, just get in the car. And they packed up all of our clothes, threw them in the car, and we left. And that house, they left it just like it was. Wow. You could just walk in and start living. They left a house the same way in Needlesville, Missouri. The same identical way. And so that's how they raised me, from city to city and state to state. They would pull out a map and they would pick another spot, and that's where we would go.
Wow.
And I would be like, Mama, where we going? Daddy, where we going? We'll let you know when we get there. And I'm like, okay. I lay down in the back seat and go to sleep, and when I wake up, we'd be at a new place and meet new people, and they'd set up a new place to live there, and they would meet the people in a church somewhere, and they would, you know, connect with those people and start running their revival and collecting money, and you know, and sometimes Olivia, well, I didn't call her name earlier on, but that was, I'm calling her name now, Olivia. Sometimes she was the one that was supposed to be my mother. Sometimes she would do like what they call domestic work. And I don't know if they still call it that now or not, but that's when a woman just go to somebody's house and clean up, right? You know, for them and get paid to clean. So she would do domestic work on the side, and I never knew what Willie did, my dad. I never knew what he did, but somehow I guess he did something, you know. But they would pay the rent or whatever they would pay, and they would put food on the table. However they bought me clothes, and you know, I never had many toys. Really didn't have toys. I played in the dirt a lot.
And I would imagine you didn't have friends because you traveled so much.
I didn't get a chance to really make friends much at all, because we would have to pick up and go again.
So you lived in supposedly Washington, D.C., supposedly the Carolinas, Illinois, Missouri, all of these places, and you were traveling with them. Now, yes. when you say mommy and daddy, were they really mommy and daddy for you at the time? How did you feel toward them when all of this was happening?
Well, I thought they were my parents. And I mean, I thought they were my parents. It was weird, but there were times to where that, you know, sometimes I would go in my room, because, you know, she was rather mean to me. You know, she was rather mean to me. It seems as if she didn't want me to be close to my dad, and sometimes I would want to be close to him, and she didn't seem like she wanted that. And she seemed to be, because it would be times where she would really tear into me and he would try to stop her and stuff like that. And so it would be times that I would go in my room and I would just cry. And I would say, I wish she wasn't my mama. And I'd just be in there by myself and I'd be like, I just wish she wasn't my mama. I hate her. But I was angry at the time as a kid and I didn't know. But I'm thinking, now that I'm an adult and when I came here and found out that she really wasn't my mother, it's like it wasn't even a shock to me. For some reason, I wasn't even surprised because I think deep down inside, I knew that it wasn't her. And I don't know, who that person is, but for some reason I felt that she just wasn't right for me.
And you still don't know who your parents are today?
No. Supposedly I'm 64 years old. I mean, I've carried the birth date that they gave me all of these years. And it's a possibility that they're correct about that, I don't know. But I'm pretty sure I've been here about 64 years. So I'm not indecisive about that part. But here I am. After all these years, I still have no clue as to who the woman was that brought me into this world and who the father was that planted the seed.
And the parents who raised you, you found out they weren't yours.
Yes.
So I want to hear more about that when we come back.
It's your time. Time to choose yourself. It's your time to heal. Transform your relationships, manage your trauma, tackle challenges with boldness and grace. Break the stigma of mental health. Inner healing is yours through the 21 Days of Healing Journal, created by women and girls sharing their healing journeys with quotes to inspire you for each day. Order yours today to get your healing.
We're back, hearing some very tragic stories about how my mother was abducted, abused, and abandoned. A lot for you to share, I know. And you're still don't know who your parents are. But there are some childhood traumas that you went through. And as you were going through this process with these people who you thought were your parents, what is one of the biggest childhood traumas that you feel like you faced?
Well, something that most people probably don't even want to talk about, and it's not the easiest thing for me to have a discussion about, and especially publicly. But being raised on the road with these people and taken from city to city and state to state and church to church, it was times to where that they would drop me with church people. And I would spend nights at these different church people's houses, and they didn't really know these people that well. It would just be somebody's church that they went to, and they supposedly ran a revival and all this, and I guess they wanted to drop me off for a while, and they would drop me here or drop me there. You see what I mean?
How old were you then?
Well, I can remember being like 10 years old.
And these were
11
people you
years
didn't
old.
know, never met.
Yeah. And one of the worst was to be sexually molested by it was a man, and he had a wife. And the thing of it is, it's so funny because I don't remember these people's names, and it's crazy because it's like I have a blank there of who they really were, but I just know what they did. And so the worst, I was molested 3 times.
Oh, wow.
By 3 different sets of people. And the man is the one that stands out the most with me. And he had a wife, and I guess they lived with her mother. There was an older lady there. And so maybe the older lady was the one that was supposed to be in charge of me. But they gave me a room, and the room was across the hall from the man and his wife. But the wife left and went somewhere. And while she was gone, it was just me and him in the house alone. And he came into my room, and he insisted that I come into his room. And when I went into his room, he forced me to commit a sexual act on him. And from that point, I hated. I hated men. I hated sex. I thought it was a horrible thing to do. I thought sex was just terrible. And so it took a long time, even when I became an adult, I still dealt with in my mind
the trauma
of what I had gone through as a kid. So he told me if I told anybody that he would say I was lying. And I was scared. So I wanted to tell his wife. I wanted to tell the older lady, but I was afraid to tell him. Because he said that he would swear that I was lying and get me in a lot of trouble. So I never told nobody. I didn't even tell my own supposedly parents. I just kept it to myself.
And you never told us that. This is my first time
hearing
that. So, gosh, I know that is really hard for you to share not only the trauma, but just the humiliation of it all, and how that took you from one place in your childhood to another place in adulthood. I work with a lot of girls, and they experience those type of issues, and it's very traumatic. It sticks with you a long time.
Yes, it does.
But you've overcome, and you're still healing from those things, right?
Yeah, you still, it's something that you never forget. When you go through trauma, you can get over it, and you can move on, and you can move past it, and you can regroup, but you never forget. It's always in there somewhere,
right?
And you probably try not to dredge it up again or bring it up anymore. You just try to go on, and then before you know it, you've blacked a lot of it out. But there's still always a little piece of it that's left there, and so that's where I am.
Right.
I went, I moved on, and I got past it. And the other two molestations were women.
Wow.
And
this is deeper than I thought.
Well,
and you went through quite a bit. I often tell people that my mother is the strongest woman I know. That she's been through more than you could ever imagine. But those are things that I didn't know you've been through. You talk about that as a childhood trauma, and then you fast forward some years later, 4 or 5 years later, at 15, and you had a child, my oldest brother, and that was a trauma, traumatic situation for you, a huge trauma in your childhood. So, what happened with your oldest child?
Well,
Next time on The Impact.
and he was the first abuser because he used to just beat me up. And then he got in a lot of trouble and got, arrested and all that. So I ended up, I never gave up my search. My son's picture was one of the first children whose picture was on a milk cart. Never give up. I felt like committing suicide. I felt like giving up so many times over. Being a single mother, trying to raise my children on my own by myself, trying to find that right man to be in my life. But meanwhile, I still had to try to be a good example to you and your brother that I raised. Never give up. Times can be so hard sometimes, and you can feel like it's the end of the road. But just don't give up. Keep pushing through. Do what you gotta do to keep pushing through.